Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. The Pharmacy Inspection Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, delivering quality and meaningful conversations and discussions about our pharmacy industry and the critical role pharmacists play in our healthcare systems. Learn more at pharmacypodcast.com. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello to all of our compounding friends and colleagues, and welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss all things compounding. Thank you for joining us again on this episode. Seth and I really hope that you're finding these podcasts useful and that every episode has, at least one solid takeaway for your compounding business, because ultimately that is our goal. Week over week, we want to make sure that we record information, have guests, or just, put this stuff out there so that you go, what? That was of value. That 25 minutes that I used to listen to this podcast had some value. That ultimately is our goal. So we always appreciate your feedback. So feel free to send us messages and let us know what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, and the topics that you want to hear. A couple of weeks ago, while I was discussing my design theory of Clearview rooms for verifications, I mentioned how it was kind of a waste of time for the PIC to have to go back and forth in and out of the compounding rooms for verifications. Given that the PICs are already torn between so many tasks, and as I mentioned, the terminology, lean process improvement. So about a year ago, let me rewind a little bit. About a year ago, Seth and I discovered that we both have an aficionado, almost a thing for lean, which now we're just going to simply boil it down to what we call, quote unquote, process improvement. So today's conversation is about process improvements that you can implement right now in your pharmacy for little to no additional cost. So at the core of process improvement is simplicity. So you will not experience any real high-tech talk or anything like that, but what we hope that you do take away is some real action items that at least drive your thoughts and make you do some consideration.
Hey, Brian. So, by the way, I just want to throw in there, I'm going to be doing a webinar this Friday, August 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be about all this stuff that we're talking about. It's a compounder's guide to Lean Six Sigma process improvement. And, Lean and Six Sigma are two different things, maybe two sides of one coin. They really honestly work well with each other. But for anybody that hasn't signed up, check it out on my website, pharmacyinspection.com. And but one thing that I tend to really geek out on is the history behind where lean came from. And it's honestly, it's a little surprising how long, like you said, it's been around for like a century. Well, who came up with this stuff? So Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about where lean came from and its fairly long history?
Process improvement is also referred to as lean and has been prevalent in manufacturing for at least a century now or more, with the early pioneer being Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. In this modern era, well-respected companies like Toyota Motor Corporation have built on Henry Ford's concepts and implemented a culture of continuous improvement and saved millions of dollars. There are four main goals of process improvement. Number one, reduce waste. Number two, reduce cost. Number three, improve quality. And number four, increase speed.
Brian, I really like how you put increase speed there at the end. And it's almost, it's probably on purpose, but that really is in that order. Almost, or at the very least, speed should be last, because you don't just come running out of the gate when when you're first starting out with something new, you get good at it, and then you get better, and you continue to get better. And then as you get better, you can progress and obviously, start speeding up the process. But, on the other side of that coin, if you have somebody that is just going to go running out of the gate from the get-go, you are going to have, especially when we're talking about compounding, you could potentially have a lot of waste, a lot of powder spilling out everywhere, and spilling liquids, whatever. It's when you are not totally adept at a particular job or skill, and you're speeding through it. That's when a lot of this waste occurs. And obviously, the number one thing there that you just said was reducing waste. So that's one of the definitely the main goals of all this. You reduce waste, you increase in efficiency, and you make it a better, more quality process. So yeah. But sorry to interrupt. I just I just thought that was really pertinent that I had to throw that in there. But let's go ahead and talk about more of this history.
Henry Ford was truly ahead of his time and said, before anything else, getting ready is the secret to success. Let me tell you about something that I witnessed recently during a site visit. A technician needed a certain piece of glassware as a mixing vessel, so they went over to, and again, they were in the non-sterile compounding room, they went over to the dishwasher and they opened it up. At that moment, when they pulled out the sliding basket inside the dishwasher, they turned to the other two technicians and basically asked, and using their own words, but they basically said, are these clean or dirty? And I kind of had a little bit of a chuckle because it's funny because it reminded me of my wife and I doing this at home. Don't tell her I said that, and maybe she's not listening. But in a compounding pharmacy, it's not really so funny considering the opportunity for cross-contamination. So the example that I want to kind of outline here as a process improvement is a designated technician whose first job in the morning is to empty out the dishwasher, to put all the tools, capsule plates, glassware, and all of those things in an appropriate place. And this all happens before any formulations are prepped, or you're looking over the day's compounding queue, or catching up on previous day's paperwork. It is the first thing to empty the dishwasher, and that's how we would train these folks. And I'm sure that a lot of you are already doing this out there in the market, but it's important that that is not cross-contaminated. So the second process improvement in this scenario is to remember that every tool of the trade has a home and has a place. Technicians who they walk back and forth to the dishwasher or to the sink to retrieve utensils is really just kind of a waste of time. Again, that's part of the lean process improvement, is to reduce waste. So I like to think about the workstation and what is needed to accomplish the formulations. Is it appropriately stocked with the weigh boats, with the utensils, with the things that I'm going to need to work at my workstation? Remember, at the core of lean and process improvement is simplicity. So this brings me to a process improvement for quality and safety, and is a concept that I've been sharing for many years now, and it's called the concept of staging. In my earliest professional career in wholesale distribution, I implemented staging to reduce downtime, which of course is considered a waste. Now I teach staging to reduce personnel exposure. And let me elaborate a little bit more on this simple concept through an example of, let's just say, any formulation. The compound script has 3 chemicals. The formulary has 3 chemicals. So I need 3 weigh boats of the appropriate size. I need 3 weighing utensils. I need a vessel for mixing. I need a tool for triturating. If I need capsule plates, then I also need the scraper and the tamper. And all of these materials are staged inside of the primary engineering control so that the technician doesn't, number one, incur walking around the compounding room in the middle of a formulation to retrieve something that they need, like a piece of glassware. The number two reason, which is the main reason and the number one reason that I love teaching the concept of staging as a process improvement, is to keep technicians from breaching containment with dirty gloves. And what that means is that soil gloves with powder residue coming in and out of the face of the hood. Powder aerosolizes at a micron level and is then released into the environment and is distributed anywhere and everywhere, which could in fact be our breathing zones. So you see the simple concept of staging as a process improvement reduces waste and it improves quality. Because let me say this again, just in case I forgot to say it in previous podcasts, a safe process will yield a quality product. These two concepts are interconnected in our business.
You said something back there about you're a tech and coming in and out of the hood, breaching containment, and all the waste that are involved with doing that. Well, it really reminded me of something when you're in the clean room and you're coming in and out of the clean room. There's that's quite a process. You're not only wasting time, but you're wasting more gowns, which depending on what level of gowning you're doing, I mean that could cost $10 each time you come in and out of the clean room with sterile gowns. So, it really makes the point that to be organized and have a system in place prior to even executing anything, it's just all around a good idea, and just you're not wasting anything. Just so you're not wasting anything. But it's so much more than that, because there are things outside of just the list that you bring inside of all the things you bring inside the clean room. You have to have all the things in stock to bring that stuff inside the clean room. So what is your system that you have in place for reordering things and restocking the few things that are in the clean room? So there's so many offshoots of this conversation that comes down to having a system in place to replenish stock, to be prepared for compounding, and on top of that, increasing quality, because a lot of this stuff comes down to if you're cutting out a lot of the wastes, you're increasing the quality of the compound. You're not breaching containment. You're not increasing the likeliness of contamination. It's that efficiency of movement even inside the clean room when we're talking about moving around. You don't want to really be moving around a whole lot when you don't need to be, stirring up more particles and generating more particles than necessary. So, yeah, there's so many factors that come into play when we're talking about this. But let's talk a little more specifically about the clean room and, a process improvement. So, let's say you had your most recent certification with your clean room and your particle counts were a little bit higher than the last time. Well, why is that? What's going on there? Has something changed in the past 6 months? Well, it's really setting up an experiment to figure out what's going on. That'll help you figure out how to improve that process or improve that situation. So all of this starts with data collection and figuring out what the underlying issue is. So, how would I go about doing that? So, I would first start and figure out, all right, what are the factors that are coming into play that are affecting my particle counts? Well, there's a whole bunch of factors. But it really boils down to like six main things that can contribute to contamination. It really comes down to six broad categories of things that can contribute to contamination. So, raw materials, personnel, training, process, cleaning, sanitation, and facilities. So each of those can then be broken down into further things, but let's focus our first primarily on, all right, of those 6 things, what is the data points that we need to collect to have an idea of whether or not that factor is contributing to contamination or in this case, increasing our particle counts. So let's for instance, the facility. You could have a lack of air control. Maybe your HEPA filters are not working correctly. Training. Maybe one of your technicians are not gowning correctly, and have not been trained properly, or raw materials. You're bringing in way too many things into the clean room. There's a whole bunch of these things, but each of those you have to figure out, all right, what's the data point that I need to collect to see if this is something that I can tweak to adjust my particle counts in the clean room. So the first thing that I would start with, obviously, is taking like baseline particle counts and seeing where the particle counts are when nobody's in the room. And then maybe from there, just on a regular basis, if you have a particle counter in-house, it's really easy to just set up and let it run. So, you could even have it, just running continuously throughout your processes. And you can figure out fairly quickly by just standing there and looking at the particle counter screen that, I just moved right by it and I got a huge spike. Or in this part of the room, like whenever I put the particle counter in this, corner of the room, there's it's just off the charts. Well, how close is that to the hood where you're compounding? There's so many branches of this conversation, but the thing that I'm getting at is that it's about data collection. And once you've figured out what points to collect and maybe narrowed down what things are affecting that data point, you can then improve the process to lower your particle counts in this case. So yeah, the whole point of this is that, that I'm trying to bring out is that we need to start collecting data to establish our own baselines in our own process control, rather than it being dictated from outside agencies. To some degree, there's always going to be regulations and there's always going to be standards, of course, and we want to meet those standards, but looking beyond the standards, because the standards are really 797. Especially is a minimum standard, and you not only just want to meet that standard, but you really should be trying to, for your own facility, trying to exceed that standard and do the absolute best process to come up with the best product. And in that, you'll also, by increasing the quality of the process, you'll also be reducing wastes. You'll be reducing costs. You'll be cutting out all the extra movement in a process that you don't need, and just do what you need. So you're decreasing the amount of time it takes to do something. But again, all this comes down to data collection. That's the main point here.
Seth, thank you for bringing up this whole issue of data sets, which we certainly agree that it's going to help our industry move forward as we start to establish our own. And I want to mention that there's actually a simple way to establish a data set for exposure using personal air sampling pumps. And I have some past history with these, and they're actually very simple tools. They're small pumps. They're a little bit bigger than a cell phone, and you can actually just drop them into the pocket of a lab coat, or you could actually maybe just put them on your belt loop. And they've got a small tube connected to the pump, and it's about the size of that clear tube that you would see in an aquarium. And that tube runs up to a small HEPA cassette that is actually clamped onto the lapel of your lab coat. So it's replicating the breathing zone, and that pump is then pulling the negative pressure air from around your breathing zone through that HEPA cassette. And so if there's any particles in there, it's going to collect that. So what the technician would actually be doing is they would actually be going through the formulation at this time. And let's just say that it's an encapsulation of progesterone as a good example, since it's both a very laborious process, it's a very dirty process, as well as it's a hazardous drug. So at the end of that 30-minute formulation, the PIC or another person nearby with clean gloves would take that HEPA cassette off the technician's lapel, drop it into a baggie, and then send that off to a third-party testing lab where then they would determine what the total exposure is. And that data can then be compared against a safety data sheet, the SDS. It's a simple process. One pump, one tech, one process, and then the data set comes back. Again, we're trying to stay at the core of process improvement through this discussion and making simplicity. So it's really a simple way for us to build documentation for technician proficiency as well. So you can see that the testing actually satisfies multiple masters in this type scenario.
So thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode. This is a conversation that is just going to, we can have this conversation for a long time about process improvement. This is just one episode in a series of episodes that I think we're going to really focus on process improvement and some of the things that, some of the tools involved with improving processes. I'm really hoping in the next couple of weeks to get a guest, a particular guest on the show who's just a ton of experience in the industry, and we'll see what happens. So, one of the things that we really need to focus on is experimental design, or design of experiments, and that's one of the big keys to all this process improvement stuff. So more to come on that, but if you're looking to really geek out on some of this stuff, or get a little bit of an introductory lesson on process improvement and Lean and Six Sigma, I'm going to be doing a webinar, like I said at the beginning, this Friday, the 31st at 1 p.m. Go to pharmacyinspection.com, check it out. Sign up right on the website, or sign up. There's a link on the website to sign up. It's going to be a webinar from through Zoom. So, yeah, really excited about that. Hopefully, you guys got some good information out of today, and hope to see you real soon. Keep the emails coming. Keep the questions coming. Really excited to help everybody. I hope everyone is finding some of these things helpful, and really appreciate all the encouragement that I get and Brian gets. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, until next time, keep raising the bar.